Hi, I'm Britton LaRue, and this is Moon to Moon. Moon to Moon is a space to consider, celebrate, and share the ways we come home to ourselves, anchor through change, and uncover our power. 1 month, one phase, one loving step at a time. Hello, Moon to Moon. It's Britton. How are you? How are you? I'm creating this introduction to a conversation with someone that I have long been in community with, Lisa Quigley, one of the 13th readers for this year's The Magician's Table. I'm feeling really grateful right now for the focusing gifts of my work and my puppy. As every time I move to media information, it feels very frightening and triggering and annoying. But in the very small world that is getting a puppy house trained and getting them on schedules and introducing them to your life, my world in some ways feels really small, and I'm very, very tired. It's starting to hit me that I'm 9 days in, 10 days in, and letting myself cry a little, letting myself be annoyed, frustrated, among other more fun feelings. What I'm learning right now in many ways is about releasing some control around how I do things and inviting my guides to surprise me and delight me, that I can be more potent with my pockets of time, and I can be just as powerful even if some of my nail polish is cracking off. Your power is not in your nail polish, even though I love nail polish. Yeah. Yesterday in Unshaming Your Chart, which has just been so beautiful to hold and to see through and to walk with. The humans in Unshaming Your Chart, it's just such an incredible group. Yesterday, I spoke on Unshaming Your Sun and talked a lot about our power is not conditional, and that's been feeling very helpful to me as I, have pee on my clothes and things like that. Urine on your clothing is not going to diminish your power, Britton. You can do this. I mean, Matt and I have been giggling that, there's something kind of humiliating, not just humbling, but full on humiliating about having a puppy. And I am receiving the medicine. Yeah, Underdog to Diva 2 has been really beautiful as a place to go to remember that my power is not conditional and that it happens in the spaces we share with one another in authenticity and in the vulnerability of our full humanity. And this is one of the core medicinal qualities of the magician's table, and being back in that frequency of feeling the magician's table, sensing its power, sensing its frequencies, its medicine, feeling its frequency is a really powerful way for me to feel returned to myself right now. So I'm really grateful to be taking a moment to create this introduction for you of a conversation that I had a couple days ago with Lisa. And in this conversation, I share a lot about how we met, and we talk about how her work has changed and gone through various iterations and modality shifts in the time that we have been in connection. And I have just so loved watching Lisa emerge again and again and again, more deeply and potently in her incredible voice. She is a word artist, a word witch, with her background in creative writing. And her Instagram has long been one of my favorites to follow because I so enjoy feeling the power of her words. Let me share Lisa's bio with you now. This is one she wrote specifically for the Magician's Table, and it's in the first person. I am a conscious contact guide, quantum hypnotist, psychic channel, and intergalactic witch. I'm a multi-hyphenate star being in human form with extensive training in hypnosis, energy work, psychism, channeling, contact work, human design, and more, which have integrated into my psyche to form a bespoke synthesis of mystical gnosis. The Glitch Witch, which is what Lisa calls herself, and that's her Instagram handle name. The Glitch Witch was birthed inside the Magician's Table 2023. Of course, that's both true and not true. As I wrote on the opening page of my TMT journal, quote, "The starting point is ancient and outside of time. My being here now is inevitable because I was always going to be here." End quote. I came to the table in 2023 with a sense of fierce readiness after a lifetime of devotion to my calling. I have felt an invisible pull on my heart since I was a little girl, talking to lilac people and chasing butterflies in the sunlight. I say it was a lifetime, and that's true, but that doesn't mean it was ever clear, or that I never had my doubts about it, or that I ever even knew what it was. But my commitment to TMT in 2023 was an energetic message through the circuits of whatever connected me to that calling. I came to the table to reverberate my clear yes through the timelines. I am ready. I am here. I will not turn away. I'm listening. It was toward the end of the TMT that I heard the Glitch Witch, and just like that, more of my work revealed itself. Another glimmering thread to grasp in the dark, another pull on the path of my heart. I call my mercurial and mutable practice Glitch Witchery, and I am devoted to helping you remember who you are and why you came here. Utilizing an intuitive blend of modalities, I collaborate with misfits, weirdos, freaks, and dreamers who are ready to claim their role as sacred aberrations in the human collective. To find the gifts you seek, look no further than your so-called glitches. All the ways you don't fit in. These are your superpower codes. You did not come here to fit in into a malfunctioning system You are here to spread your alternate codes through it like a holy virus to glitch the system. Thank you for that beautiful bio, Lisa. All right, dear listeners, I would like to share with you this beautiful conversation with Lisa Quigley. And for those of y'all considering the Magician's Table 2025, know that Lisa is hosting the 2 p.m. Eastern Thursday group. 2 p.m. Eastern on Thursdays is Lisa's cohort. So, without further ado, I give you this conversation. Welcome back to Moon, Lisa Quigley, the Glitch Witch.
Hi,
so glad to have you.
I'm so glad to be back here.
Yeah, I was going to say it's your second time, but you were also on a group call last year too, I think, for Magician's Table.
Yeah.
Right? Okay.
Was it Magician's? Yeah. Yes. It was, I think it had to do with, it was one of the topics with the groups. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, was it maybe the one on like Star Family?
I think so.
That was that.
Wait.
Anyway, I'm so glad to have you back.
Sorry, I'm like, was it modality as me? I can't remember.
Oh, maybe it was modality as me. Because now I'm thinking, I think Star Family was maybe Lily and Aaron. And I think maybe you were on modality as me. And last year's Magician's Table, like those were the big keywords. My modality as me ended up being a huge like flare in the sky that brought people in last year. So brilliant. And that's the wording of Carly that was in your cohort. Yeah, she said that
I think
one day
Carly
in
was
class.
on that call too. That's what made me remember, as I was like, I think Carly was there, and I think it was because it was my modality as me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so good. It's so inspirational. Thank you, Carly, for those words spoken that day. Yeah. So we're here today to connect because you've accepted my invitation to be one of the 13th readers for this year's Magician's Table. So thank you.
You're welcome. I'm so excited. Yeah.
As I shared with you, your name was like very much in my field last year to join us last year, but there was like some other voice that was saying not now, not now. And so I was so excited and like surprised / not surprised to find out that you had the same experience on your end of feeling like there was something about last year that would have been a not now if I had invited you, and that this year it's aligning.
Yeah, it's funny. I think I told you when you messaged me to ask me that I had always wanted to be a 13th reader in this very playful, holding it loosely way. Like that would be so fun. And I knew last year it wasn't the year. I was going through still stuff from 2023 Magician's Table, which was when I participated, that was still unfolding from that time. I was still in a digestion phase of caterpillar cocoon turning into goop phase from everything that had happened and everything that came up and through in that experience, that I was not, it was that, it's like when you talk about, what is it, not now versus not ready, or something like that.
Mm-hmm,
It was a
mm-hmm.
definite not now. This is still percolating and congealing and reconfiguring. And this year something else is happening where it's like I have this momentum behind me that I just feel. It's a propulsive feeling of now. And that's in regards to this, but it's also in regards to my work, the way it's changing, the way I'm relating to it, even the way I'm relating to owning that I have a business, which I've just kind of been like, it's my sidekick. And, for a long time, or I'm just playing around. Now I'm like, no, I have a business and I'm learning how to do that. And it's going to be messy. But I'm taking action. I'm like doing all these things so I can learn on the job, on the go, for how to have a business. But yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so let's think. We connected probably like 2022-ish. I really can't remember how I started following you. Back then you were the creativity witch,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like I somehow, maybe someone tagged you. So I started following you and I started to just be like, oh, I really like the things that this woman is saying. And we felt a kind of resonance with one another. I think that was through maybe 2022. So I was so excited when you said yes to the Magician's Table in 2023.
Yeah, I don't remember exactly, except for, and we may have talked about this in the episode I did with you. I am pretty sure the first time I consciously heard of you was when you did an episode with Danica Boyce.
Yes.
The living the fuck out of your chart episode. And I was really following Danica's work at that time. So then I started following you. And I think the first container of yours I was ever in was Cave Space. Was, I think,
I
2022
remember.
Cave Space, I think.
Yeah, I remember you in like the chat and contributing and just like, oh, this is so fun that she's here.
Yeah, and I had listened to all the promo of 2022 Magician's Table, and it was again that not yet feeling, because I was still, even at that time, trying to figure out, what is this? What am I doing? And I knew at that time I wasn't ready for what the Magician's Table would be. Would I was still experimenting. I was still very nervous, and very nervous about reading for people live, that not recorded. And I was just also not even sure what, like, is this something I'm really doing? I don't know. I just listened to it and I was like, but I think when I am more clear, I am going to want to do this. And then when I think the minute you opened applications 2023, my application was in. I was like, if she does it again in 2023, I'm definitely doing this. So that was how I ended up there. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And back then, when you entered, were you thinking your modality was going to be the tarot? I'm trying to remember
So
in terms of your relationship to modalities, because I think that's such a fascinating part of your story. It's just how the modality keeps kind of turning.
ugh,
Mm.
figuring out the modality, Britain, for me has been, I think, almost the most painful part of this. I'm like, why can't I just be like a tarot reader or an why can't I just be a thing that people know what it is? And figuring out how to even talk about it. So I've had tarot decks since I was I think I got my first one around 25 or 26. I was 25 or 26. And I'm turning 40 next week, by the way.
Ah, happy birthday, Aquarian.
But I didn't know how to, like, I would pull cards and be like, what am I even looking at? This makes no sense. I didn't understand the symbols. I was like how does anyone do this? But I always had this longing, like I really wanted to know how to do it, but I didn't understand the language yet. And I dabbled, I would read books, but nothing would ever stick in my head. I would pull cards and read the guidebook and be like, I don't know what this means, or is this trying to tell me? I would always try to be like, what's coming in the future, and like pull cards and then get really confused and be like, I don't know. But in 2019, moving into 2020, I just was like, I want to learn this. I want to learn it. I wanted to learn it. I had started, I'd kind of discovered Witchstagram. Is that what? It's like Instagram, but for witches. It was like Witchstagram, where it was like people posting about witchy stuff and tarot pulls. And I was like, I want to be able to do that. And so it's like, I'm going to learn. And so I started pulling cards every day and just journaling what I thought. And I at that time I had found Lindsay Mack's podcast. I was binging that and really coming into kind of what she introduced me to was this relationship with the cards that was less about these prescriptive interpretations and more about what is it invoking in me in the present moment. And I just started trying to develop a relationship with them. And then I took one of Lindsay's classes. I think it was her, at the time it was Tarot for the Wild Soul, which was her full how to read tarot course. And I just, ever since then, I still pull a tarot card every morning just to, sometimes I don't even journal about the card. I just pull it and kind of see what I feel like journaling about that morning. Sometimes it's connected to the card. Sometimes it's not directly connected to the card, but it also is always connected in some other way, but I also knew at that time that I didn't want to be a tarot reader. Like I would see, it kind of reminds me of when you talk about how you knew you were interested in astrology, but you weren't necessarily, there was something else about it that was speaking to you. And I felt like that with tarot, where I'm like, I could just go on my Instagram and post 3 cards and have people blah, blah, whatever. And I tried that here and there, but it just didn't feel like it. And that was maddening too, was that I didn't know why I was being pulled to learn this thing when I didn't think that was it or the thing, but I knew it was a pathway to the thing, sort of. And tarot is actually, the way I look at it now, it's very, very present in my life. I actually don't talk about it publicly that much, but the tarot archetypes they're just embedded in my life. They're embedded in I pull them every day. I pull a bunch of cards to guide the year. I think about the year in terms of tarot a lot. It's not a big part of my outward facing work, but it's a big part of my internal process.
Yeah. I would say I'm the same way.
Yeah. And that was a crazy time because I was just like, why am I being called to learn this thing when I don't feel like I'm really supposed to be a tarot reader in that more traditional sense? So then I started, I'm also a writer, and I started to realize that the tarot was speaking to me about the creative process and my creative process. And that's when I started talking about creativity on my Instagram. So at the time that I joined the Magician's Table, I had done a lot of, my Instagram had kind of evolved to this point where I was talking a lot about mystical creativity and rewilding creativity and disentangling our creativity from some of the patterns, the destructive, exploitative patterns of overculture. And that was what I thought the direction of my work was going. And so when I joined the Magician's Table, I was like, well, I'm probably just going to develop this, even though that still, like, if I really dug deep, that still didn't feel quite like it. But it was something, it was like, it felt tangible and it felt slightly different than maybe just, because I knew I didn't want to just like generally read tarot for your life, like in general. And I am a person who has always cared about my creative pursuits, whether it's writing or whatever else. And that felt, okay, I can do this with people. That's exciting to me. I want to unpack this. And as my work has evolved, I do still think it's about that, but it's also really multidimensional. Because to me, it's not just about creative projects per se, but it's like how we're here to live into that calling, and that way we're called to be different in some way, and how that can be a creative expression, but it's not necessarily writing or art. It's more,
Yeah, when you came
yeah.
to the magician's table, were you the creativity witch at that
Mhm.
time?
Mhm.
Okay.
And I really thought I was going to develop, well, I was at that time also getting into the Akashic records. So I was like, okay, I'm going to develop my tarot practice with the Akashic reading practice. But in this, I really thought it was going to be in this creative mentorship kind of vein. And that's what I started doing with people when I was doing the readings. But it started to evolve while I was in there and get bigger. And that's what catalyzed the cocoon process after the magician's table, because I had really thought I was going in this one direction, and it was really important to go in that direction because it was taking me toward where my work was going. But when I was in the magician's table and I started to see more of the picture, it was still different from what I thought.
Mm-hmm.
So that was really interesting.
Yeah. What do you think it was about the container of the magician's table that was kind of taking you to another direction? Like, is there something about the container itself, or was it the
Yeah.
readings you were giving, the reflections you were receiving? Was it just having that much intense time with your own process? What do you think it was?
What I think it is through that. I mean, it's not any one thing, but through the process of all of it, being reflected back in the readings, certain things someone would say that sparked something, like when I would do the readings with people for the weekly practice, the ways that people reflected me to me in the weekly meeting, and also in my own continued exploration with the development of my practices and my modalities, I realized that here's what it is that the creativity piece of it felt very digestible and containable and safe. And I was like, people will understand this. People want help with their creativity. This is an area I have a lot of practice in. I can do this. And I could be a very good creativity mentor. But through the process of all the readings, all the sharing through vocalizing what was coming up for me in the weekly meetups, through reading the speech of the Grail, through my own development and where I started to clock where my actual fascination was going. And I realized that's actually not what I want. What I want is way weirder. What I want is what's exciting me when no one's looking, the books I'm pulling, the podcasts I'm listening to, the information I'm getting from the Akashic records. this the things being reflected to me in the readings. Like I remember sitting down with Rebecca Padgett, and she goes, there is something, I don't remember exactly what she said, but she's like, this, your channel is so galactic. Yeah. She says. And I was like, chills all over my body, because I hadn't told anybody that I was having this secret obsession behind the scenes, that's what I was really secretly wishing I could be talking about publicly. And I realized that the creativity piece was a way I had tried to make my mysticism palatable for people. And it's nothing wrong with creativity. Like I said, there's still a way that my work is doing that, but it's in a more shape-shifty way, I guess. I don't know if that describes it, but that's not the sole emphasis anymore. And when I had that realization, I'm like, I don't even want to do that. That's boring. I was like, this is boring to me. To just, like, if I have to talk about creativity and the creative process and blah, 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 for the next 20 years or whatever, however long I'm going to be doing this kind of work, I was like, blah, boring. I don't want to do this forever and ever. You know, this is why I don't know. This is why I don't want to get locked into something that's just like, this is what people can get. So I'm going to position it in a way that is approachable to more people, so that they don't see how weird I am. And then I can still have my own kind of practice, my own kind of business. But I realized, like, I'm not in this. If I'm going to do work, mystic work that is in the vein of having my own kind of business that's working for myself, then I don't want to do something that I'm ultimately going to get bored with. And that's actually not what I really want to be doing. And having that realization, though, that's what really sent me into the cocoon again, because I was like, I have to really work with all the I had so many scared parts about letting people really see all the weirdness, and how, to me, it's like this shimmery, like the way like a butterfly's wings are like holographic. Like that's what kind of looks like if I, like how I would look if I showed people, like, just how weird I am. And I had to do a lot of work with myself to even get to the point where I could say certain things, because I'm like, I just know that when I start, I just had this sense when I start talking about this stuff, I'm going to get attacked. I'm going to get shut down. People are going to cancel me. People are going to be mean to me. People are going to think I've lost it completely, you know? So, yeah, that's all.
Yeah. Meanwhile, I've been watching and cheerleading, just like, yes, Lisa, keep talking. Because, I mean, you know that I also am obsessed with the phenomenon, UFOs, disclosure, the non-human, and like it's also my private bedtime reading is all about this, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I feel that actually collectively it's going to become more and more. It already is just in the last 2 months, like more and more humans are like, wait, what? Orbs, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And as I felt your energy moving towards this conversation, I felt extremely excited to see where you were going with this, because I feel like is going to become more and more important to create language, to create grounding, to create like frameworks for how to let this in, like ontologically, psychologically, into our space. Because to me, this is like the most woo thing. Like it is way, way more taboo than astrology, you know?
Yeah, which is why I was so scared. I'm like, oh my God, like, I'm like, things have come so far in the sense that I can tell regular people that I like tarot, that I like astrology. What I mean by regular is people who aren't necessarily into this world. I can tell them, oh yeah, human design, but it's like a thing kind of like astrology, but it's another way of your person, blah, blah, blah. And I could even say to some degree that I do psychic readings or whatever. And that is getting less weird. But to say that I have alien guides that are talking to me, I have had, Britton, I have not even shared publicly the full extent of the type of contact that I have had since I started really opening up to this, because I'm building up to it. I'm not hiding it anymore, but I have a pathway of how I'm opening this whole conversation up. But I'm like, even my husband, a big part, this is an important piece to the magician's table too. Because when I got with my husband, it was right after my Saturn return. I was 30 years old, and I was already I've been into this I've had a mystical curiosity for almost my whole life. And at the time I met him, I was a yoga teacher, and we met online, and one of the first things after our first meetup, I texted him a link to Aquarius and Taurus compatibility. So it's not like he didn't know, it's not like he didn't know that I was into this stuff. This was always a part of my personality, but it wasn't always super front facing. It was more, I would read books about tarot, or I had tarot decks. I would ask him for tarot decks for Christmas that I wanted. He would see a pair of Aquarius socks and buy them because he knew I was into this stuff. So it's not like it was ever a secret, but it wasn't a forward facing part of my identity. And as I started to realize, like, oh, I actually want to be a more forward facing person in this kind of world, I had a lot of fear that I'm like, what if he thinks that's not the person he married? That's that, because he's very Taurian. He has so many earth placements that I can gather. He doesn't know his birth time, and it's not on his birth certificate. But when I kind of did like a very loose guess based on what his mom thinks, it's full of earth, his chart. And I was just like, oh man, he's going to be like, what did I get? I did a lot of I made up a lot of stories about what he was going to think that weren't true. They were just stories I made up out of fear. Like, oh, he's going to think this and whatever. And I remember one time he asked me, he realized I was going out back every morning, and he was like, what are you doing going out back? And I was like, I pour a cup of coffee outside every morning. And he's like, why? And I was like sweating, like, oh, I gotta tell him, like, I like to give the land some of the coffee we have as like a little like offering, blah. And I just told him, he's like, oh, okay, that's cool. And he's like, oh, kind of like blah, blah, blah. He said something else, and it was just no. And then I started talking to him, I just started word vomiting, like, this stuff is blah, blah, blah. This is how I think, blah, blah, blah. And he was like, yeah, I know. He's like, I live with you. I see what books you have. It's not like, I don't know. I just felt like I had to hide it from him, not because of who he is, because I had so much fear around what would change if I changed. And would he still love me if I was evolving as a person? And he was and how he's very supportive. I mean, it's not his fascination, his whatever, but he has his own things that I see as his spiritual practices, even if he wouldn't label them that way. And he's also just somebody who's very, he's good at being on this planet, which helps me a lot. But when it came to the alien stuff, I was like, man, I'm like, this is going to be weird for him. Like, this is really weird. Cause that's just not where his focus is, and I was like, is he just going to think I've really lost it? I've lost touch with reality, that I'm going off I had so much fear. And he follows me on Instagram. So I started talking about this stuff, and I just had never had a direct conversation with him. And then I was doing something, I know what it was. I did a contact workshop with one of my, one of the only people I trust in this space, because we can talk about that too. It gets a little bit like distorted, in my opinion, once you start getting into this stuff. And he asked me, well, what was the workshop? And I said, oh, it was just with one of my favorite people. And he goes, was it aliens? And I was like, yes. And then I just felt like, okay, I need to just tell him, like, I need to just have a conversation. So I stopped feeling like I'm hiding, because that's like a pattern where since I was a kid, I would just hide my private world so that nobody could judge it, or nobody could take it away from me. And so I told him some of my experiences, and I told him why it was important to me. And he goes, I believe you. I believe that you're really having these experiences, and that this feels real to you. He goes, I just have a hard time wrapping my head around, like, for myself. And I was like, okay, like, that's a way better reaction than I would even in my panic, like, story making place. And I ended up taking a bath, and I was doing some energy work in the bath, and I was kind of like doing practices. It's a lot like what Natasha does, and I'm working with Natasha and with another teacher on it. But I did where I separated our energy. I was like doing work I was grounding, I was clearing out survival energies and punishment energies, and grounding with earth and grounding with cosmic energy. And I was doing work on my aura. And then I put Chris outside my aura, and I brought up this situation of the aliens between us. And I was able to see from that place, with getting some separation, some distance, that he believed me, that he was giving me that belief, and he had skepticism, and that both of those things were valid parts of his experience that he's allowed to have. And then I was able to see that it's not like, if he has skepticism, that's not an attack against me. And also I was like, I have so much skepticism. Like, I'm allowed to have skepticism. We all have our skepticism. And I think that's a healthy piece. So it really helped me to see that, that I had his support, and I had his belief, like, he believed me, but that the skepticism is allowed to be there too, and that wasn't about me, and it wasn't directed at me. It's just like, he has skepticism because this topic is so forbidden. So, I mean, you bring up this topic, and this is, even if you think about years and years and years ago, this was a topic that could get you completely, literally ostracized. Like, I watched some of these documentaries from sightings in the 80s, and people were afraid to report sightings because they would get shunned and labeled, like, literally
crazy.
Shunned. Yeah. So anyway, that was a lot, I feel, but it feels important because it is such a and I think this is related to the table too, is that there's a fear, and I had this fear too, that I'm going to lose the people I care about if I'm as weird as I am. I just have to tone it down.
Well, in this piece with this initiation that you're describing that you have been going through with being able to see skepticism as not a threat to your devotion, to your weird devotions, shall we say, with all the love that there is. It's like gonna be so supportive to you then as you fortify yourself for talking about contact, aliens, the galactic with anyone listening, because you're developing what it feels like to me is you're developing like the inner scaffolding to be able to hold everyone's skepticism as valid and not a threat to what you're into, It's actually probably like a really important conversation, is like how mysticism doesn't mean abandoning skepticism,
Yeah.
It's almost like your skeptic being allowed to come with you almost like allows you to be able to then stretch even further out because you're not trying to deny some part of you that is very real.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that because of, in a lot of ways, because of how I grew up and because I wasn't believed and I wasn't allowed to have ideas that deviated from the accepted teachings or belief system, that skepticism it lived in my body as an attack. Like, you're not allowed to have those ideas. You're not allowed to have that experience. You're not allowed to have that belief, or I don't believe you. So doing this was so powerful, and I have been working with it since then, of like, skepticism is not an attack on me. Everyone has skepticism to varying degrees for varying reasons. And when we get into a parts conversation, a lot of people's skepticism is a very healthy response to things that have happened to them in the past, or ways that they were hurt, or ways that, people tried to push their beliefs on them, or whatever it may be. That skepticism, I think, is a very intelligent response for a lot of people, as a form of protection, right? As a form of not getting duped or getting sucked into something that could feel like it might take your autonomy. And so I think a big piece of it was I had to work with, and also when I saw his skepticism, I was able to more clearly see my own skepticism. And I realized too, there's people I learn from on this topic who I trust, and sometimes their stories and the people they're working with are having experiences that are even more wild than the experiences I've had. And even as they're telling me, and I can feel their groundedness and the truth telling in their voice, there's a part of me that goes, really? Okay, this really happened? Serious? I have a skeptic. I have an inner skeptic too, and I'm like, I'm allowed to have one. So other people are allowed to have them. It's not personal.
It's not personal. Oh my gosh. I love talking about this with Matt, who, he's had his religious trauma, and he knows way more about the Bible than I do, but he talks about like Thomas and the doubting Thomas, and like how Thomas was the one that got to touch Jesus or something like this.
He had to see to believe.
Jesus loved the doubt, but there can also be like culture that's like, you're not a good Christian if you have doubt, you know?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
um, this is for me early on. I really took seriously Carolyn Casey's um, words about believe nothing.
Mm-hmm.
It's like about exploring and experimenting and just being in like the curiosity frequency
Mm-hmm.
that I think is probably got to be like so key when we start talking about contact and aliens and like what is showing itself to me. Because there's, I mean, I don't know. I'm curious what you think about this. Like, is there ever a 100% even possible to know what it even is that you're engaging with, you know? Um, there's got to be a big part that feels still mysterious. Do you feel that
Mm-hmm.
way or no?
Mm-hmm. Oh, definitely. And even with the experiences I've had where I'm like, that was real. 100% that was real. I also have a part that was like, what the hell? How is that real? Like, I don't know. I don't even know what that is or what's going on. And I also feel like I have eliminated, or not eliminated, but I don't really want to operate on in the paradigm of belief. Like, I don't believe in
Yes. Yes.
aliens. It's not about
Mhm.
believing in them. It's not about believing in tarot, believing in astrology, believing in this stuff, whatever it is, believing I'm psychic. It's not about belief. To me, it's what would I call it instead? I think it's curiosity, it's relationship, it's an exploration, it's opening to possibility, and it's a language in some ways. To I don't that always comes through of like it's a language, a way of orienting to reality that helps me understand reality better. And if it's my subconscious concocting really bonkers experiences that I can't explain with my conscious mind, if it's literally just my subconscious, I don't care. You know? I,
So,
but at
yeah,
the
go
same
ahead.
time, the deeper I go into it, the more, and the deeper I go into it without needing to prove it's real. When I kind of first got into this stuff, even before the alien stuff, I went into tarot with this attitude of, what if I don't have to believe in this? What if it's just I'm just experimenting and seeing how it relates to my life and seeing how it opens up my life and seeing how it feels to live in this enchanted way? What if there's no magic at all? What if it's none of it's real? That's fine. The paradox of that for me is that the more I went into it with that idea, the more real things started to happen and that I
Mhm.
couldn't explain. And I'm like, okay, this, and the more I opened the aperture to the possibility of living in a way that's more enchanted, the more enchanted life became, and the more evidence I started getting that it was enchanted, and that there is
Yes.
something else going on. Another thing, though, that is really interesting to me is, and I think is going to be really important for us moving forward, just in history and time, is remarrying the science, the scientific with the mystical.
Yes.
Because,
1,000 times yes. So into it. Yes.
yeah, because when people want to call this stuff fringe and they want to say it's taboo and it's crazy, whatever, you're having some sort of psychotic break if you think you're talking to aliens. what people don't realize, I don't think a lot of people realize, I think you know because you're more in this world, is there's areas of science that are literally studying this stuff. Like legitimately, quote unquote, right? So there's a guy in England who's a PhD. He was working for a university. He's doing more stuff on his own that has done and has been doing actual funded studies on using DMT to communicate with entities beyond Earth. And like, so yes, it's kind of fringe in the science world, but I don't think people realize that the science and they're kind of, it's like a loop. They're like, it's like a Ouroboros. They're part of each other, and that they're the same. I think of them almost like two, it's like the axes in astrology, like two poles of the same spectrum. and they're meeting each other in so many ways. And maybe it's not as publicized or talked about, but there's very real work being taken in these arenas that maybe just aren't getting a lot of as much airtime as other things.
Yes, so big. Have you had a chance to tune into the telepathy tapes yet? You're gonna love if you haven't.
Yeah, I'm about 4 episodes in. I was listening to it. Oh my gosh, I'm gonna write a whole newsletter about this week. I hope. I'm planning on it. I recently watched the movie Interstellar on a plane, and I know I had seen it before, but I just don't think I was there in my consciousness for it to click in. But I was weeping on the plane watching this movie, and I don't know if you've seen it recently or if you know the kind of
I get
plot.
a bunch of them mixed up. Is that the one that has Matthew McConaughey?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I recently rewatched this and was like, whoa, we weren't ready for it then.
No, we weren't. It's so prophetic and so visionary and so good. But so there's this piece, and this is what I want to write about in my newsletter, is that, and this is connected to the telepathy tapes cracked this open for me, this connection. But how he is, Earth is dying, and he has this opportunity to go into space, which has always been his dream. And there's this potential that they might find another world to live on to help rescue the people on Earth, or help them find another place to live, whatever, or figure out a way to help save Earth, whatever. But the piece that always gets me in that movie is that he had to leave his children, didn't know when he was going to come back. And it was to save them. It was for them, but it was also for himself. He wanted to go. Like, he was like excited to go. And so there was that piece that had been percolating. And then I was listening to the telepathy tapes, and there's I can't remember which episode I got to, but I was on the subway coming back from New York because I work in the city once a week. And I just had to pause it because I started crying, because there was this realization. It was I just had this moment where I'm like, these children are growing up in a world that doesn't see them, that doesn't validate the way they communicate, that doesn't even acknowledge them or even have a place for them, really, just because they don't, they communicate differently. They there's like that whole ableist piece of like, they're not able to participate in society in the way that like most people are quote unquote expected to. But then hearing this, I think it was a moment when I was hearing one of their internal worlds, like, I'm so intelligent, I have so much to share. We're just like all the things they were saying, and I just started crying on the subway. And I was just thinking of like, this is why I'm doing the work that I do, that is very weird and very uh uh awkward. There's a self embarrassment piece of it, right? Because a lot of people don't believe in this stuff or value it or validate it, and there's a discomfort. And not to say that there aren't people, I think there's people doing lots of other like tangibly important things, but for me as a person called to this kind of path, to do this very weird thing at a time when it's considered weird, is to make a bridge from this world into the world where those kids don't have to like, they're seen as full human beings. It was the phrase, they don't presume competence, that got me, of like, I was like, in a world where we automatically presume competence, and we know that there's multiple ways of communicating and there's multiple kinds of intelligence. And I just said, it put it into a bigger context of like, maybe the discomfort of someone mocking me on Instagram, it's so small compared to what we're bridging into, and then it connected to the interstellar piece of like, well, obviously I'm not leaving my kids behind and leaving them in that sense, but there is a sense that in some ways when I'm doing this work, there's a selfishness to it of, my kids might not get it, or they might wonder why I'm talking about this weird stuff, or it might take me away from them in certain ways with my energy, where it's not all being poured into them 100% of the time. But I'm like, I'm building this world, I'm bridging to this. I mean, not just me, but all of us who are doing this are bridging to this world. We're going out into this unknown, and there's a selflessness about it, because it is for them, but it's also because I want to.
Yes. Well, and that's touching on the piece that I feel in you, and is a huge part of why it was just so important for you to be part of this year's Magician's Table, is the theme I'm calling in this year is the devotion that's driving you, and just like trusting that this devotion, while sometimes may come across as selfish to the people around you and your intimacies that are like, geez, you work a lot.
Yeah.
It's just like, doesn't feel like work to me. It's like a devotion. It is a devotion, and you have to trust, right, that it is somehow propelling the collective, even as it is a personal obsession.
Yeah, and obviously with Interstellar, it's not like, oh, it's going to be like in this movie, it's metaphorical, it's dramatic, it's one man goes and helps solve the whole thing, right? But it's more on a smaller personal scale. Looking at that as like an initiation journey, and seeing, he went, and it was so exciting. It's all he ever wanted to do, was go into space and find out what else was out there. That was his passion. It takes him away from his kids. His daughter's devastated and angry with him for leaving. And while he's up there, it's hard, that he struggles, he weeps, and in like grief for missing his daughter. And then they go on this weird thing, this one planet where it warps time because the gravity is so different. So then when he gets back to the main ship, like 25 years on Earth have passed, and he realizes like his daughter's a woman now, and he's like sobbing, and his son's so I'm just obsessed with this movie lately, because I feel so many parallels. But it speaks to what you were talking about in your last episode, and just in this theme for this year, that our desires are things that most excite us are not going to be necessarily constantly delightful the whole time or easy, or like there won't be moments where we wish we could just do something easier and be, you know, not have to go through all this, or settle back into the known timeline, even if it means giving up a part of that spark, or that passion or that excitement, because it's not always easy. In fact, I think it would be quote unquote easier to not do this.
Totally. Totally. Yes.
But
And
boring.
It's like, I know. I'm like looking at your Mars Venus conjunction in Aries there. Yeah. Yeah, this idea of like our desires are not, the desire isn't lazy. It's actually work. Um, with all that we scaffold around it to help it thrive. Yeah, so do you know, or do you have an inkling about what you might be offering, like with the partnering for Magician's Table this spring?
Hmm. I
Like
have,
what will they look like at this point? You know it's gonna
yeah.
totally
That's why
change.
I'm like, I have an inkling, but I also have a sense that it might change. I have a mini offer that I was testing last year that I want to turn into a bigger offer. I actually have it on my website, but I just put it up there. And it is called, when I did it last year, I did like a micro reading, like a psychic reading with a quantum hypnosis track that they would then listen to after they listened to the recorded psychic reading. But this offering is called Imaginal Cells Activation, and it is designed to, because I really like this idea of caterpillars having these imaginal cells that they have no idea are there, and then evolution just kicks them on. They just activate, and then suddenly the caterpillar's like, what is happening? I'm building a cocoon. I don't even know what this is. And then turning into goo, blah, blah, blah. And then there's these cells that once activated tell it how to become a butterfly, and that's just in there. It's going to happen no matter what. So I like thinking about this energetically for those of us who feel called to something, and especially as one who knows what it feels like to be called to something but not know what it is. So in this offering, so I tested it last year that in that format, but how it's developed in my mind now is it's simultaneously a psychic reading, but also taking them into like a light hypnosis to connect with that part of themselves, like in real time, and guiding them to connect with those, what is activating now, where am I being guided to now, even if I don't know where it's going. Because that's the thing with the caterpillar doesn't know it's turning into a butterfly. It just starts, it just starts doing all this stuff. And so, yeah, as a container to help, if not know where you're going, trust that process of morphing, mutating, on that
Wow.
pathway. Yeah.
That sounds delicious. I've
Yeah.
loved
So that's what I plan on doing now, but who knows if that'll.
I have received a like a psychic, so it was some kind of like soul code kind
Oh,
of
blueprint,
reading that
soul's
you did.
blueprint.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was so important. I've been, I think about it all the time. And then we did that huge hypnosis reading where I saw myself in the different timelines.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, just really appreciating your gift and excited for your cohort to experience what's coming through you. Thank you
I
so
can't
much
wait.
for saying yes. Thank you for being here today. Thank you for sharing yourself. It's just been so cool to witness you mutate over these years. You're like truly living emergence.
Yeah, and that's the thing too, is I feel like while I have more clarity at this moment, I'm like, I don't expect to stagnate here. Who knows what it'll be in 10 years,
Right.
if it'll still be.
Yeah, it's like, but now you've really been learning how to stay with it, you know, and
Yeah,
so as it will mutate, so will you,
yeah.
and you'll just stay emergent with it.
Mhm.
You've been cultivating the tools to hold all the parts of you that are terrified by that, and as
Yeah,
you learn how to do that, you can just mutate away.
yeah.
Um, so thank you so much, Lisa. I'm so excited to be working with you in the months ahead.
Thanks, Britton. I am so excited to see who lands in this cohort. Yeah.
Me too. Thank you.
Dear listener, what Lisa describes here about the fear of losing loved ones, of being abandoned when we update, when we let people know who we are, is so very real. Is so very real, and in my process as a mentor to many magical humans, this fear is one that I see again and again and again, and it can really hold us back. This fear that our loved ones will not come with us, with where our soul is taking us. So I'm so grateful to Lisa for sharing her experience and letting us hear her and witness her in her process of being vulnerable in naming and claiming one's interest in not only learning about becoming, like what is contact, what would a contact experience be like, but in being someone who publicly talks about it and also helps others to come into their own contact experiences. I don't want to presume I understand exactly where Lisa's offering is going, but that's a really powerful offering at this time when, as I was saying, it really is to me one of the most taboo things in the woo world. And I am deeply, deeply, deeply celebrating Lisa for going there and for just honoring the path of her emergence as it keeps talking to her. And I'm so proud and excited to have her with us for the 2025 Magician's Table group. Lisa's cohort, as I mentioned, is meeting Thursdays at 2 Eastern. So if you are able to connect with Lisa at that time and join your cohort of magicians at that time, I'm encouraging you to apply, where you can then indicate which cohorts you have the capacity for, like you have the desire for. Some of y'all will maybe only have one cohort you can possibly do. And some of y'all may just be like, you choose. Like, I'm open to seeing where destiny takes me. And you can totally do that. People do that. And then I'll place you based on what you've shared and like the frequency that I feel from your application. I can place you where I just have a feeling you belong. So I'm happy to do that if you feel like it's going to be a hard choice for you to pick a cohort. All right. Remember that the early bird deadline for the Magician's Table is Valentine's weekend, February 14, 15, 16. Those 3 days only. You can only apply if you're on the Magician's Table wait list. So you'll want to get on the wait list. That's not the same as my mailing list, although you will be put on my mailing list if you're not already on it. But it's a specific list, and only those individuals on that wait list are going to get the link on Friday the 14th with the application to apply for the Magician's Table, and only those who come through those 3 days are going to be eligible for the discounted early bird pricing and for the opportunity to apply for a scholarship seat. If you have any questions about the process, please do not hesitate to reach out. If you have any questions about whether this is right for you, please do not hesitate to reach out. I mean it, I mean it, I mean it. And if you are not sure, if you don't know that you are ready to say that you want to enroll, my invitation is to go ahead and get on the wait list so that you have the opportunity to apply, because getting on the wait list is not an obligation to apply, and applying is not an obligation to enroll. So there will still be some space between you applying and me getting back to you before you then do have to make an absolute decision, because we need to know if that seat is yours or if it's going to belong to somebody else. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you, dear listener. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you, dear Lisa. Thank you, Magician's Table 2025. I already feel you. I already see you. And I'm so excited to do this with you. Cheers.